discussion was all about when we were talking about you started with what is contract basically, and you pointed out an agreement enforceable by law is to be called as contract, and then in the term called agreement, you told us that how does this term agree stands for, like in agreement में जो term है agree ये important है rather. इसके अलावा फिर enforceable by law, like enforceability by law is that when the other person will be eligible to go to the court and force the other person to fulfill certain obligations. Then you took us through a different aspect altogether to this, and you told us that all agreements are whether all agreements are contract or not. Then you also told us legally binding relationship, and you gave the example of family. You gave us the example of husband and wife, and that was a very likable example to that. Then you told us about the offer and acceptance. How does one makes an offer? How does one makes an acceptance to that end? Then you also told us about consideration. And before doing that, you told us about the essential requirements for offer and acceptance. Foremost, which was important, was communication of offer and acceptance, which was primarily a must to that. You also told us that how offer and acceptance must be clear and not vague in its first place. Post which you took us through invitation to an offer, general rule, and then there was a change in with respect to invitation to an offer rule. Of course, we have not gone through the postal rule, but I believe we can go through also the essential ingredients of contract, which is foremost the important section when it comes down to law entrance examination testing. What are the essentials of ingredients of contract, and then there comes a very essential and important factor to that: free consent. Half of the questions on contract law which ever come in law entrance examination, and you can agree to that, are from this particular topic of free consent, which is basically all these questions of coercion, undue influence, and basic understanding of these concepts. In fact, the most talked of example being somebody pointed out a gun, or has a gun point at your girlfriend's head, and then they asked you to sign a land deed. That one. Along with that, the essentials being lawful consideration, of which you already told us that it means something for something. Quid pro quo, किसी चीज के बदले किसी चीज को लेना, मतलब which has a monetary value. Rather, you told us that one cannot say. You gave us this example that you cannot say मैं तुम्हें जिंदगी भर प्यार करूंगा, and that can be a consideration. That can't be a consideration to that end, of course. Okay, lawful object. There must be a lawful object, which you were telling us about. You were telling us about drugs issues. You gave example to that end also, and you said law college में नहीं होना चाहिए, and everybody was laughing onto that example. Competency of a party is another important aspect. We must understand the minors are defined in the Indian Majority Act, which a lot of people are unaware. They think a minor है 18 साल age बस है. There is no law to that end, but Indian Majority Act deals with that. So that being said, you have already took us through over here. Then the legal object, you pointed out certain example, competency. Then we will also consider. We will cover today something called minor, the case of minor, the case of unsound mind, or certain times people don't go into this area, but persons forbidden by law. Some people are forbidden by law. So we will cover into, we will hope that you get into this aspect also. And then then in the case of minor, necessities of life, and that all famous case of Moheri Biwi versus Dharmadas Ghosh, which the law entrance examination have been trusting from over the year. From last 20 years, they have been relying upon this particular case to frame questions on minus agreement, rather minus contract for that matter. Consideration, we covered it in a very wider sense yesterday. And you told us that it must not whether consideration is adequate, but whether it has some value in the eyes of law. So that being said, ingredients of contract, let us start with this, the consensus ad Adam, and from that let's go on to mistakes which make it void ab initio, and then voidable part, coercion, undue influence, misrepresentation, and fraud. So from here on, it's over to you, Animesh.
Thank you, Harsh Bhai, for giving such a nice summary to what I have told and what should have been told. Thank you so much. And today's discussion, yesterday's discussion I was carrying out was regarding basically that a contract has two parts, an agreement and enforceability. Yesterday we were talking about agreement part, means the offer, the acceptance and the consideration. Today we'll talk about the enforceability part, the necessary conditions that a contract must fulfill in order to be legally binding in eyes of law. So that when you approach the court of law with that agreement, the court of law will make sure that the parties to the agreement will stand true to their words. Now, essentially, to enforceability, there are few factors of enforceability. The first being capacity, second being consent, third being legality, fourth being not barred by law. These four are essential features of the contract. Some are also considered possibility and all. But today we are going to briefly discuss the major four factors of enforceability. The first of being capacity to the contract. Section 10 talks about the capacity to the contract. Indian contract. It says that who can enter into a contract. General nation starts that everybody can enter into contract. That way contract act is very liberal. It says anyone can enter into contract except certain people. Now, when we create an exception that who cannot enter into contract, the basic factor is that a person who cannot make decisions on their own. It means the groups that are vulnerable cannot enter into contract on their own. Or secondly, the people who by making contract will not serve purpose with the country's laws. Means they are in conflict with our country somehow, so they can also not make contract. So basically, today the contract, the capacity to make contract states that a person who is either minor or a lunatic person. Now, minor simply we know already has been stated that Section 3 of Indian Majority Act 1875. It clearly states that a person below the 18 years of age is minor. Earlier, the concept of minority was a bit different for the people who are governed by Guardianship and Wards Act, but that difference has been done away with. Now, every person gets the age of majority at age of 18. No waiting for age of 21 for the Guardianship and Wards Act. That difference is done away with. Everyone attains majority at 18. So the first essential of capacity to the contract is that the person must not be minor. And why minor cannot enter into a contract? So the logic is very simple. Because minor, a person who is below 18 years of age is not considered competent or not considered mature enough to decide his own interest. Generally, the presumption to the law is that everybody is in a capacity to judge his interest, but that is not the case with minor, because we consider that a minor is simply not competent enough, not mature enough to understand the consequences of his action. Second part is regarding lunatic, a person who is not having mental stability or he is suffering from any type of mental illness will be deep into that. A person not having the mental capacity, he cannot enter into a contract. Third being the person who lack the capacity to enter into contract because of their status. Now, certain people are there who cannot enter into contract. There are people like alien enemy. Alien enemy to say any person who is a citizen of a country with which India is at war. यानी if India is at war, भारत युद्ध पे किसी देश के साथ, suppose it is not in present, suppose India goes to war with Pakistan, so any agreement made with a Pakistani citizen will be void, because by agreement both parties benefit and we don't want to give any benefit to any such person who is our enemy. So enemy aliens are barred from the contract. Similarly, life convicts, a person who has been sentenced for life is sometimes restricted from entering into contract, because obviously he cannot fulfill that contract because he is supposed to be in jail for the rest of his life. Thirdly, a person who is insolvent. You can say insolvent means a person whose assets are not sufficient to meet out his liability. So if a person is declared insolvent, insolvency itself means that person is not capable of paying his debt. so not able to discharge his obligation. So person who is already proven that he is incompetent to discharge his obligation will not be allowed to accrue any further obligations by entering into contract. So a person who is insolvent is also declared insolvent by a court of law is also not competent to enter into law. A similar rule was there regarding Pradhanasheen women, means a woman who does not come into public or because of any religious or cultural rule, she stays in her house always. So that was also necessary. The present position of law is a bit ambiguous, but to my understanding, the Pradhanasheen woman, that concept is also a bit redundant and old. Now all women are having authority to come and to administer their own affairs. Now, coming on to the minors agreement, is what happens when a person with lacking the capacity to enter into contract enters into a contract, so it simply renders the contract void. Now, what is a contract which is void? So, in the simplest sense, a void contract is a misnomer. The void agreement is the term. An agreement which is not enforceable is considered as void contract or void agreement as such. Void agreement, which word we should not use, not legal as such, but still it is used commonly. A void contract is zero. Nil bata samata, zero. It's absolutely something which is not enforceable, not in place, and has no legal consequences whatsoever. So, an agreement with a minor or a person of of unsound mind, or with a person who is barred by law to enter into contract, there are void. Regarding minors contract, there's few things that you have to keep in mind. That a person who is a minor cannot enter into a contract very simply. Secondly, he can be a beneficiary of a contract. It means this provision is there to protect the minor. The famous case of Moribus Dharmodas Ghosh that Harshbhai pointed out, in that case it was very simple. Minor took a loan and minor mortgaged his property to someone. Minor ne given property. Now, once the minor mortgaged his property to someone, that someone approached the court of law to get that property sold out to recover his debt. The court said no. Minor cannot mortgage his property, cannot enter into a contract of mortgage because a minor is incompetent to contract. But can the other person sue minor for recovery of the money? That you have taken money, you give it back, a minor will not be bound. You cannot bind the minor with a contract. But on the other hand, if another person has taken anything or is any under obligation towards minor, then the minor can enforce the contract. I understand very clearly. If a minor enters into a contract, although that contract is void and minor cannot be sued, but if the minor is beneficiary to a contract, it means a minor has given you a loan. Suppose minor gives a person a loan. I take 10,000 rupees from a 17-year-old boy. Whether I will have to pay back or not? So the answer is yes, because the minor can enforce any contract that was to his benefit. Suppose many of you are in school and some of you may reach the law school while you are 17. I reached the law school, National University Patna, when I was 17. So when I was 17, I reached the law school, I was a minor. So I entered into a contract with the university that they will provide me quality legal education that all NLUs offer. Not go delve deep.
Inverted commas on and off.
Quality legal education. Now, I will not discourage you in any manner. Please do come. And if you come to NLU Jabalpur, I will personally give you that quality legal education. So don't worry. So I'll say that the university entered into a contract, and rather that if a university, suppose 1 year later, the university says, okay, I will take your money, but will not teach you without any reasons. So whether I can sue the university or not, obviously I can, because that contract, the beneficiary is the minor. If the minor is the beneficiary, the minor has the capacity to sue. So a contract in minor's favor is allowed, but contract against minors is not allowed. Achha, now there is also a technicality that what will happen if a minor misrepresents his age. So a minor goes and say I am 19 or at 20 year and then enters to a contract, and other party unknowingly enters into the contract considering that person in good faith to be a minor. So then what will happen? So the answer is very simple. Then also the contract is void. The contract is still void, but the doctrine of restitution will apply. Now, what is restitution is very important to understand. The restitution simply means restoring the earlier position. When in a contract, both the parties do something for the other party. Suppose I am selling my house to a person, Mr. A, and Mr. A is giving me 40 lakh rupees. So after the performance of the contract, I am 40 lakh richer and I lack a house. Means I am minus one house. Mr. A is having plus one house and minus 40 lakh rupees. It means our position has changed. Restitution will mean that the earlier order is restored. If the court orders, no, you have made this contract, but we are restoring it. So if the court orders restitution, then my house will come back to me, his 40 lakh will go back to him. This is called restitution. So if a minor misrepresents his age, says that I am a major and enters into a contract and gets something. It means suppose a minor goes to a shop and buys a car, suppose, and says, sir, I am 20 years old. I need a car in installments. I'll pay you, suppose 1 lakh rupees as down payment and rest 9 lakh rupees I pay in EMIs. So the company, the person, the financer or the showroom owner, he gave him the car and the documents were signed. Later on, the minor says, no, I will not pay the remaining 9 lakh rupees. I am happy, I got my car, we are done. I want my 1 lakh rupees back because I'm a minor, but I won't give you the car either. So the court will say that, okay, this is the correct position, that the car showroom owner cannot sue the minor for remaining 9 lakh, as you cannot compel minor to perform his part of promise. But since the minor misrepresented the age in this case, the minor will have to return the benefit he got. It means the minor will have to return the car. Once the minor returns the car, the minor will get his 1 lakh rupees back. The court will restore the earlier position. It means the minor's car will be returned and 1 lakh rupee he'll get back. So this is called restitution. But suppose if the minor was 16 years old and it was known to the shop owner, he knew that he's 16 years old, still he gave him a car and entered into a contract. So that in that case, shopkeeper will also not get back the car because he entered into a completely void contract, and if you knowingly enter into a void contract, there nothing will be there to rescue it from the consequences of its illegality. So it's very simple. The contract will be a void contract. A minor's contract is void contract, but a contract made for the benefit of the minor, like the contract of education, like a contract of apprenticeship. Like suppose some minor has gone to a particular person to learn a trade. Learn a trade means a minor goes to a shop of a smith and wants to learn the trade. It's if you will go and start learning the trade when you are 20 years old, that will not happen. You'll have to join him as an apprentice, as a learner from the very beginning. As a child, people join the craft, and if you want to learn a trade of hand, suppose you want to learn a sport, you want to play a sport, and you join a coach. You will not join when you are 25. I cannot learn a new sport except Teen Bhakti now. But if you want, I want to learn swimming and want to compete Olympic swimming. So I cannot do that because if I wanted to be a swimmer, I would have joined at 8 years of age, 7 years, 8 years. People join the professional sport. So if a person enters into a contract with coach being a minor, whether that contract is enforceable or not? Yes. A minor enters into a contract with show business. We have seen minors acting in movies. Minors act in movies, minors act in TV shows, minors do all kinds of performance. So whether that is valid or not, so that is valid because that contract is for the benefit of the minor. But minor cannot be compelled to do something which he does not wants to do. Suppose if a minor takes money from a producer of a film and he wants to return that money, but minor is not willing to act in the movie after a particular 2 or 3 shootings. So then whether the producer can compel that minor, the answer is no. You cannot compel the minor at any point of time, but a contract for minor's benefit is valid. Now, one aspect of it is also comes in quasi contract. That is a different aspect. If we'll get some time in the end, I will discuss. But if a minor takes some necessity from a person, that is a necessity clause, that is an exception to the rule that a minor cannot enter into a contract. The necessity rule. Necessity rule simply means that a minor, if he takes anything which is necessity for him, necessity means food, clothes, education, shelter, medical facility, legal help. These are all considered necessities.
In the past year papers, they have already pointed out and asked this with respect to the books. The
Books,
minor
education is
books.
also necessity. Education is necessity. Health is medicine is necessity. Legal help is also necessity. Lawyer fees is also necessity. There are judgments of the Supreme Court which points out to be. So briefly, you can say whatever comes in Article 21 is a necessity. So if you see, if certain person provides you anything, if any person provides a minor anything which is a necessity, then that person can recover that amount from the estate of minor, means property of the minor. Still, minor cannot be held personally liable. Yani ki he cannot compel the minor to pay by working or by doing any other thing. If the minor has the property, then that money will be recovered from the minor's estate. If the minor doesn't have any property, then well and good. I always say that civil law will never harm you if you don't have money. If you don't have money, you are immune from civil law. Like suppose I don't have money and suppose a tort is happened by my hand. I don't have money, what will I pay? The court will understand my issues. So if you don't have money, you chill. But if you have property, then that person who has supplied necessity to the minor can recover it. So a brief picture of the minor's property, that a contract cannot be enforced against minor, but a minor can enforce a contract as such. If you have given a loan to minor, you cannot ask it back. But if a minor has given you a loan, minor can ask it back. With similar purpose, there is simple logic that this provision of Contract Act is intended to protect the interest of minor at all costs. It protects the minor. It will never go the other way around. It will never hamper the interest of the minor. So it is protecting the interest of a minor. So minor's issue is briefly this. Now coming on to the issues of a person who is unsound mind. Now there are two kinds of insane person. One who is an idiot. Idiot word is a person who is born or is completely insane. It means he is perpetually lunatic. Yani he is always insane. Another type of person is who is a lunatic. Now lunatic is a person who remains sane sometimes and sometimes becomes insane. It means he can have a disease which is, suppose he has OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or he gets seizure attacks. Even a person who, there are certain diseases in which a person is normal at many point of time, but at certain point of time they start getting seizure. Or even a drunkard comes within definition. A person who is a habitual drinker, when he drinks too much of alcohol, it will not know. Even very prominent person, alcohol, they'll take too much alcohol, they'll start saying all kinds of things and dialing numbers on their phone which they are not supposed to be dialed. Harshbhai will weigh into that.
To that, and yes, this topic again, I can tell you that this has featured in a lot of entrance examination, especially to this end, what he was telling about. A lot of times there are situations coming along wherein they say a particular person who is sometimes of sound mind and sometimes of unsound mind enters into a contract when he was of sound mind. पहली ये सिचुएशन आती है जिसमें आपसे सवाल यहाँ पे पूछा जाता है when he is of sound mind. दूसरी तरफ यही क्वेश्चन, यही पूरा सेट रहता है और बोला जाता है he enters into the contract when he is of unsound mind. और फिर यहाँ पर आपसे legality of contract की इन दोनों केसेस में पूछा जाता है. So that way, this particular topics give you at least 1 or 2 marks when it comes down to law entrance examination. Anmesh ji.
Now Harshbhai clearly said that if the contract says that a person is insane, makes a contract when he is sane. So a person who is lunatic, It means he is sane sometimes and sometimes he is insane. The time he remains sane is called lucid interval. Lucid interval, the time he is sane. So a person makes a contract when he is sane, that contract is valid. Now I'll tell you a very, very important thing that is always very technical term when it comes to law school examination. Who will have to prove the insanity? Now, simple rule is that the court presumes every person as sane. But it's a very important question. But any person who pleads insanity will have to prove that this person is insane.
Yeah.
Any person, suppose I drank too much alcohol, I was very, very, very drunk, and somebody came to me and asked me to sign a particular paper. I was asking, I sign the paper. And he took entire property of mine. Fortunately, I don't have property. But suppose if I were the owner of property and he took a sign from me when I was drunk. So I will approach the court of law and say, sir, I was lunatic at that time. I was insane at that time because I was drunk under the influence of alcohol or drugs or whatever the case may be. So the court will presume every person will say, but if you want to prove it otherwise, then you will have to adduce evidence for the same. So this is the rule. There is one question from someone known as Samrid.
Yeah.
If something benefits of the minor, the contract cannot be, it can be enforced. If something benefits a minor, it can be enforced. So say I buy a bike to go to school because it was essential. As it was the only option for me to go to school, obviously, bike can act as a necessity that will depend on the circumstance.
Yeah, he added only. He added only to that and gave us the answer.
If it is the only way, then of course it was a necessity. If it is the only way that to go to school, then it is a necessity. Then if I took a bike, I took a loan, I took the bike in installments, then I will have to pay back or I will have to return the bike. Because that contract, that person can get it back from my property. That person who supplied me with necessity can get it back from my property. Arun asked that how to prove that I was drunk, for example. Somebody may have seen me drunk. I'm a habitual drinker. It was a Saturday night or a Friday night. There are a number of circumstantial evidence by which a person can prove somebody may have seen me in the liquor shop.
Video recordings, webcams.
Video recording. Generally, don't get drunk in front of people who are not well known to you. They are often the people who will record.
Yes, witness. Somebody wanted out.
And don't drink in the front of people who don't drink. I love to be with the people who drink. I am a teetotaler, so I go and I listen to them. That is a mine of information. So a number of information they say, that's very interesting to know. But still, I tell you, you can prove it by witnesses. Witnesses or circumstantial evidence that a person was drunk. So simply, I was talking about that if a person is lunatic, then the contract entered by him is void unless he was in lucid interval. Means at the point he was sane. If he was sane at the time of making the contract, then the contract is valid. A contract made by an idiot who is insane all of the time is not valid at all. So simply, if a contract is necessarily being made, so legal guardians made the contract on behalf of minors as well as persons of unsound mind. There are certain contracts which the guardians can enter on their behalf. So that is also sometimes the case. Now
Animesh,
moving on.
There is this, Animesh. There is this question, how is contract related to a specific performance act? I believe he is talking about a specific relief act.
Specific relief act. There is a concept of specific performance. That is generally when you promise to sell a property or you have made any contract which the breach of which not fulfilling the obligation will harm you in such a way that money will not be enough compensation. If I make a contract with you, suppose you own a hospital and I am a pharmaceutical company and I supply you medicine.
Yeah.
And just as the time when you need medicine, I'll say I will not supply you medicine, I will not give you medicine. So what loss will be there for you? Your patients will die,
Yeah.
and that will not be compensated by money. So immediately you will rush to the court and try to get an order from the court, sir, compel that person to give me medicine, because I will not find a medicine at any in such short notice from anywhere. So compel him to perform his contract, because if he will not perform his contract, then obviously I am going to suffer a loss which is far beyond the actual value, monetary value of the contract. So that is called specific performance. That is a very unique and interesting way. Save something for the law school. Your contract teacher will help you out with this. So now, another interesting question, another interesting remark about that, that we were talking about capacity after capacity. The point is of free consent. Before we go on to free consent, I'd like to distinguish between void, voidable, and a valid agreement. It always comes down to this. So, valid agreement is obviously all essentials of contract is fulfilled. So, it's a valid agreement. So, what is a void agreement? So, void agreement is zero, unenforceable, having no legal validity. Voidable falls in somewhere between. Now, this free consent is as simple as it sounds. That if in a contract either party's consent was not free. Now, what vitiates a consent we'll discuss later. But in the simplest sense, if your consent was not free, then the contract entered by that person is voidable. Voidable means capable of being made void. It means the person, the party to the contract whose consent was not free, can approach the court of law and get that contract nullified. Means he has an option of avoiding the contract. He can go to the court of law and say, sir, I entered into the contract, but my consent was not free. So kindly free me from this contract. If the court is, if the court sees, if the court observes that actually that contract was in such a way that the consent was not free, the court will nullify, will rescind that contract and get it done with, be done with it. So free consent is very much required. A contract which lacks free consent is not void but voidable. It means capable of being made void. So the party whose consent is not free can approach the court of law and get their contract invalidated, nullified. उनको void declare करा लेंगे. A contract made without free consent is not invalid per se. It is valid till the party whose consent was not free goes to the court of law and gets it invalidated. यानी उसको invalidate कराना पड़ेगा. If a contract is without free consent, the other party will have to go to the court of law and get the marriage cancelled. Now I'll try to tell you a very interesting example. It's not of a contract, but still like in marriages. The part where I come from in India, there is a custom of abducting the grooms. Now, if you are an eligible person, eligible bachelor, and you are roaming around the streets, now Harsh Bhai shifted from Patna because of this only. I'll tell you a secret. So, if you are an eligible bachelor like Harsh Bhai, the people will follow you for few days and then will abduct you, get you in a Omni van, and take you to another place, and then they on gunpoint they will ask you to marry a girl, and obviously on gunpoint the people will do anything. So the marriage happened. So at that time the marriage is not void. Marriage is voidable. Now another person, Harsh Bhai, has an option to go to the court of law and get that marriage nullified. But here the option is also that he may like the girl. Okay, this girl is very beautiful. I would not have been able to charm her out of my own. It's very good that generally this was there to discourage the practice of dowry. A lot of dowry was asked, so the grooms were abducted. So if he thinks, okay, if this is my fate, now the marriage has happened, I have promised in front of God, so let it be my fate. So the contracts become valid after that. If you have accepted that, then the contract is valid. But if a person says no, this is not done, so he can go to the court of law and get that marriage invalidated. But it remains valid till it is invalidated. Yani ki a person has an option the person whose consent is not free in a contract has an option to go to the court and get that marriage void. But if he chooses not to, then the marriage then the contract remains valid. Contract or marriage, as the case may be.
Anvesh, on this point, kids, again, there's one important term over here, Latin maxim, consensus id idem, which means
Consensus ad idem.
yeah, both parties agree upon the same thing in the same sense.
Same thing in same sense.
This term has been asked quite a number of times. Therefore, I thought of
n number of times it has been asked.
Yeah.
There is a particular threat to free consent known as mistake. So in that context, it is used. Consensus ad idem means there should be free consent by both the parties, and both the parties must understand
in the
same contract, sense. What the contract means, same thing in same sense. Unless they perceive it in same sense, that contract is not valid. As such, we'll come to that when we'll discuss mistake. Thank you for pointing it out. I would have missed it otherwise. But free consent I was talking about, that it is voidable contract, voidable agreements, very important. Unless and until the free consent angle is involved, do not tick voidable agreement at any point of time. There is nothing else that makes a contract voidable unless it is free consent. The people even ask, sir, minors contract, can it be voidable? No, minors contract is void or valid. Any contract, illegality, everything, voidable is never the option unless the angle of consent is involved. So now what makes a consent not free consent? What makes it such vitiates the consent? First is coercion. It means somebody threatens you to do something which is forbidden by penal laws. Means if I intimidate you, if I commit or threaten to commit any offense under the criminal law. Suppose I threaten you to kill, and I will kill you if you don't enter the agreement. I will kill your son, I will kill your father, I will burn your house, I will defame you in the newspapers. Whatever the case may be, if any threat is made to your person, property or reputation, and such threat or such violence has been committed, in both the cases, it is considered as the contract has been vitiated, the free consent has been vitiated on the grounds of coercion. Coercion means threat. Threat can be done by actually committing an offense or threatening to commit an offense. So if a person shoots your friend in front of you and say, I will kill you also, or simply puts a gun in front of your friend or your family or any person in whose life you are interested. So obviously that is considered as coercion, and the contract will not be considered valid. The person whose consent has been taken by force can approach the court of law and get the contract nullified. Second part is called undue influence. This is also
Animesh, in the first part, the coercion, while you were discussing, you pointed out a particular term called reputation. And I must on this particular point tell the law school aspirant that a lot of times question have been raised where a particular person has threatened someone that they will leak a particular information about that particular person, or they will file a case of something with respect to defamation. So in that way, when the reputation was also concerned, that was considered within the aspect of coercion itself by the papers, law entrance exam papers.
Yes, threat to defame. So now, at sometimes threat to sue is also considered as coercion.
Yeah.
But that is not the correct. That is not the correct explanation, because I will file a case against you is not an offense under IPC. Yeah. Okay, I will persecute you falsely. I will file a false case against you. That is a threat, because that comes under section 190 to section 198 IPC perjury. That is a valid threat to vitiate the consent. But if somebody has actually committed an offense, if I tell, okay, I will tell the police about the offense you have committed, that is not coercion, because that is not an offense as such. Reputation comes from the tort law, how it is related to contract act. It's also related to criminal law. It is also defamation, section 499, 500 IPC.
Yeah.
So it is also forbidden under IPC to defame someone. So that is why the coercion itself clearly states that if anybody threatens another person with an offense under IPC, that is called coercion. So obviously defamation being an offense, it is also relevant there. Now we were telling about undue influence. So undue influence is simply when a person is in a position to dominate the will of another person. And by using his dominant position, if using his dominant position, he compels him to enter into a contract. Now, what's the one difference between coercion and force? The coercion and force are, force is a criminal offense. Force, criminal force, assault, battery, assault or hurt. There are different concepts of criminal law, but when it comes to contract, the word coercion is sufficient to is an umbrella term of all types of threat, not of using force only. If I am telling you that I will defame you, it does not involve force, but it's still a coercion. So coercion is a bigger term, an umbrella term, which includes all types of activities as such. Now I was telling about one person who is having some dominant position over the other. Yani I am in a position to dominate your will, and because of that dominant position, I compel you to enter into a contract, and that contract is voidable because of the logic of free consent. I'll simply tell you that who is in a position to dominate another person. Simple answer is that three types of relations which come under this domain. There are three types of relation. Number one being a person who has real or apparent authority. Real or apparent authority means any person who can command you, who can harm your interest, like, or a person who is simply in a position of command to you, like real authority. Who has real authority over you? Your parents have real authority over you. Your employer has real authority over you. Suppose if my father commands me to do something, I will do it because obviously my father has real authority over me. My mother has a real authority. If I disobey her, what will happen? Obviously, my mother will say, okay, 9 months I have taken pain and I have...
Jail superintendent.
No, okay. Okay, then again, people like employer, like obviously jail superintendent, and apparent authority as the people who can harm your interest. Like you are a person is accused in an offense, and I'm judge, or I am an investigating officer. Somebody is a tax defaulter, and I am a tax officer. So that person is, and I am having apparent authority over him because I can harm your interest, like a teacher. If in university a professor asks you to do something, it is generally observed that you will do that, because if you will not do that, he will show his fury in the exam paper. So a person who can adversely affect your interest, can harm you physically or financially or educationally or whatever manners, is called a person in real or apparent authority. And the question between doctor and patient, that is second point, fiduciary relationship. Relationship based on trust. A person, there is a trust relationship like doctor and patient, lawyer and its client, the
Parents.
lawyer employer, there is real authority. Like friends, like between brothers, family members, the lovers.
And on this point again, there has been specific questions in the past year over this particular topic, and they were basically concerned about fiduciary relationship. And the one and the foremost loved by the committees across the year has been a spiritual guru and devotee relationship.
Devotee. If your Guruji asks you, donate me property, beta Maya chhod do. तो फिर क्या करे माया का, तो हमें दे दो. So if the Guruji asks,
and we would like to just tell, it's not just only the Guruji from there can be question on this aspect also.
Obviously, spiritual leaders. That also a person who is under an influence of a spiritual leader, who has who has prostrated in the feet of a spiritual leader. Obviously, the Guru has some authority over him. Fiduciary relationship, that is generally on the family members or the friends or the lovers or the husband and wife or the doctor and pet, or professional relationship like your CA and you, like your doctor and you, like your advocate and you. These are all fiduciary relationships. So if somebody abuses a fiduciary relationship, like suppose there is a spiritual guru and say you, okay, you give all of your property to me and I will make sure that you go to heaven. Later on, few years later, few months later, if the Guruji himself finds himself in jail, then obviously the devotee will reconsider that what he was promised. So he can approach the court of law and ask, sir, that I want to get back my property. That is fine. Third is a person who is in charge of a person who is ill or aged or infirm. It means somebody is taking care of a person who is sick or who is very aged, very old, and physically dependent upon the caretaker. So that caretaker is also considered to be in a position to dominate the will. If somebody is your doctor or nurse or a caretaker, then also there is a relationship in which one person can dominate the will of another. So if one person is in a position to dominate another person, and by using his dominant authority, he compels another person to enter into a contract. And now there is a presumption in terms of incontestable bargain. It means if the contract is not free, it's not fair, unfair contract. Suppose there is a particular, if my big brother, my brother asks me, I own a property worth 30 lakh. My brother comes to me and say, okay, sell me your property, I will give you 29 lakh rupees. Now this is a bargain which is very much fair. 30 lakh property, he offered me 29 lakh, is my brother, I will obviously give him that property. So here it will be said that no undue influence is there. But if he comes to me and says, okay, I will give you 1 lakh rupees and transfer me your property, and he gives me, okay, that look, okay, I'm your big brother, I do as I am telling you. So obviously I will say, okay, fine, take that property. Now this agreement is sometimes known as incontestable bargain. It means unfair bargain. So if there is any unfair bargain, that is an evidence that some kind of undue influence has been used. So if undue influence has been used, the person whose will has been so wrongly dominated can approach the court of law and get the contract invalidated. So undue influence is another factor is there.
Okay, on this point, Animesh, again, the questions have been over the years with respect to uses that position. First and foremost, what happens is, as a law aspirant usually do, they understand this concept in one line, that is fiduciary relationship. They just look into that there is fiduciary relationship. इसका मतलब पक्का undue influence वाला टिक कर देना है. But ऐसा नहीं होता है. You have to look into this part also, that यहाँ पे जो relationship है, उसके बाद using that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. This aspect has to be fulfilled. Then only it will be coming under the concept of undue influence. So remember this while you are approaching these kind of questions.
Also remember who is in a position to dominate whom.
Yeah.
There has been a question in which tenant got a property from the landlord. So now between landlord and tenant, who has the dominant relationship? Obviously the landlord has the upper hand. Yeah. So suppose landlord complains that, sir, I have been made victim of this undue influence and my tenant pressured me. So you will say that what kind of relationship is this in which, suppose obviously I cannot pressure my father. He said, okay, obviously I cannot dominate someone who is I am a professor. I cannot say my vice chancellor, I have a dominant relationship with my vice chancellor. Obviously he will always have the upper hand. So always see who can be dominated. The person who has a lower hand in the relationship, only he can. There can be a undue influence. It is not the other way around.
Yeah.
Another part is regarding fraud and misrepresentation. Fraud, in the simplest sense, you can say, making whosoever uses deceives another person, and then makes them enter into a contract. It is considered as fraud. Now, what is means by deceiving is simply making a false statement, knowing it to be false. If I make a false statement, suppose I make a statement to another person that, okay, I have this big house at my native place. It's seven-storied building, and it's everything is there, swimming pool and all. I make all types of false promises, and the price is 2 crore, and I get that 2 crore from him, and then when he visits my house, he says that I have only a sometimes jhopadi type of structure. So that is obviously called fraud, because I have made a false statement and believing on that false statement, he entered into a contract. So the person who has been made victim of the fraud can approach the court of law and get that contract nullified. Now there is a difference. There are two terms: fraud and misrepresentation. Misrepresentation means you have made a false statement, not knowing it to be false. You don't know that it is false, and another person believing on a statement enters into a contract and then suffers a loss. Then also he can approach the court of law and get that contract uh, declared void. But the fraud differs that you make a false statement knowing it to be false. So the fraud is intentional, misrepresentation is unintentional, but the result is same. So in both the cases, contract is voidable. If I make a false statement to you and knowing it to be false, that is fraud, and get your consent to do a contract, that is void. I show you the photo of someone else and gets you married to someone else, that is fraud. Obviously, I show you a photo, I give you nakli note, that is also fraud. I give you a false property which is not owned by me. Suppose I want to sell you a property which is not owned by me. I have made you a false statement that this property is mine. So then that is called fraud. When you know the statement you are making is false. Misrepresentation, you have made a statement knowing it to be true, but that is false. And you got the consent of another party. Both the cases, the contract law says that that contract is voidable. But the only difference will be there in criminal law or tort law. In fraud, you can sue another person for deceit. That will be an actionable wrong in tort law as well as criminal law. Criminal law, you can sue that person for cheating. But as such, fraud requires mens rea. Fraud requires knowledge that what you are saying is false.
It has to be a deliberate misstatement to a fact material to the contract when it comes down to the fraud.
Means Fred, obviously I have been telling a wrong thing about now. Here, see, it must be that I have communicated something which is wrong. Yeah. If I have remained silent, if I have hidden a fact, that is not fraud generally unless I have a duty to disclose. There are some contracts in which a person has duty to disclose everything. If there is no duty to disclose, then silence will not amount to fraud. If you remain silent, then it is not fraud. But if you have said something, you have made a false statement, then obviously, if you have made a false statement, then it will be considered as fraud and the contract will be considered a void. Obviously, material to the contract. If you have made a false statement regarding something which will affect the willingness of other party to enter into a contract, insignificant fact, significant fact, which if truly disclosed would have changed the perspective of that other person for the purpose of entering into a contract. If I tell you the property I am trying to sell you, it is not in my name, but in someone else's name, will you buy that property from me? Obviously not. Can you please?
Animesh, he is asking that let's take an example. So I will take an example from the past year papers itself. Arun, so on that point, what happened is in case of a fraud, take an example. I own a sports shop, and you come to my shop and you see a bat over there. That bat has a beautiful carvings on it, and while you are looking at that bat, I tell you in that sense that this bat was used by a particular cricket legend, Sachin Tendulkar, while he used to play. And further, that was used by other famous cricketers as well. So what happened is I am telling you this information, which I know, which I have a knowledge that it is false. But I actually believe that when I tell you this information, that can make you buy this particular bat. And if believing on this particular information, and I being sensing an opportunity that I can sell you this, you buy that particular bat. Now that comes down to be a fraud. Yes, Animesh?
Exactly. That will be amount to fraud because that is material fact.
And if I'm having a sports shop and my father has set that particular sports shop, and when you come over there and you ask me about a particular bat, and I believe it, I really believe that bat was used by Sunil Gavaskar, and I say to you, yeah, this bat was used by Sunil Gavaskar, and I really believe. The term is that I believe, the shopkeeper believe. Then representing a fact material to the contract, उसके बारे में misstatement करना will be misrepresentation. यहाँ पे इस केस में misrepresentation हुआ है. Animesh?
obviously, when you make an innocent statement knowing it to be true. Read the case of Derry versus Speak. That is one interesting case in that regard. Derry versus Speak is very. Can you provide free consent example in supply contract? I am not getting supply contract. Kindly clarify it, because now the last thing which makes a contract void that comes under the domain of free consent is mistake. That is what consensus ad idem is about. Mistake of that if either party is mistaken about the facts of the contract, then the contract is, again I'll tell you, void. Mistake makes a contract void, unlike all other things like coercion, undue influence, fraud, and misrepresentation makes a contract voidable. But mistake makes a contract void. Now again, kindly think that it is mistake makes a contract void. Now what is a mistake? So simply if either party is, if one of the parties, both the parties are mistaken regarding a material fact, then the contract is considered as void. The example will be very simple. If I'll come to you and I said, okay, I want to buy a house of yours. I'll tell you, okay, my house is rupees 50 lakh rupees. You say, okay, 50 lakh rupees I will pay you. But actually I have two houses. One in suppose Jabalpur and one suppose in Patna. And I was thinking, you were talking about Jabalpur flat and you were thinking about Patna flat. So there is a mistake. We are both thinking about different things. If both the parties have any misconception, lack of clarity regarding what the contract is about, then the contract is considered as void.
So, on this point, again, Animesh, the example which Animesh gave, this has been asked in a lot of entrance examination with respect to the property. The other few topics which have been used in this regard were you own a particular pet. Like I own two dogs. One is black in color, another one is white in color. And the buyer thinks that I want to sell the white dog. I think that I'm selling the black dog. And in that particular scenario, this particular mistake is also considered under this particular topic. And to be very to telling you in forefront, mistakes as to the identity of the parties, we will do so. Mistake as to the substance of subject matter, this is another one. And then mistake as to the identity and nature of subject. Three areas are there which are tested in law entrance examination. Over to you, Anish.
The mistake of law, he's asking what is mistake of law. I'll give you a simple example, please.
Bihar.
Simple example that suppose if I buy a particular good from you and I think that the GST on that good is 15% and you think it is 11%, this is a mistake of law. That will not make the contract void. Because what is the GST rate is a question of law that has been fixed by the government. That is not a factual point, that is a legal point. So that will not make a contract void. If you don't know the law, that will not help you. But if you are mistaken about a particular fact, like again white dog or black dog or which car to sell, or if there is not lack of clarity in regards of the contract, then that contract is considered as void. Mistake makes a contract void. That is all about the free consent that we are required to know. Over to you, Harsh, if you want me, because if we have time.
Animesh, in just a few moments, I would just like to tell them what other questions have been asked in the law entrance examination from this topic. One and foremost was that when two people were entering into a contract, and A was selling his standing crop to B, which means, if I am telling you in Hindi, उस समय खेत में वो फसल खड़ी हुई थी, standing crop. It was, but later on it was discovered that the crop was, this particular crop was destroyed by the fire, by burning at the time when the contract was being made. So this is an example as to mistake as to the identity and nature of subject matter. So this is also we must remember when we are approaching the law entrance examination, because this particular example has been asked quite a number of times. Okay. Then also, like somebody wants to sell his car to another person for which they are entering into a contract. Later on, it was discovered that the car was actually owned by another person. Okay, so this example has also been asked in law entrance examination. Over to you, Animesh. And to the example of a mistake as to the law, yeah, the most and foremost example which everybody take is if you are entering into the state of Bihar, taking the alcohol with you.
Alcohol with you.
Yeah, so that is an example. You cannot say that you do not know a law. The reason being that the law is basically published in the official gazette of a country, wherein after which it is supposed that every citizen of this country and every the mistake as to the matter of fact and mistake as to the matter of law. Over to you, Anish.
Harshbhai, this is about the free consent that we can discuss. If the time permits, we can discuss about legality of the contract. That is one topic that will broadly cover the concept of enforceability that you have to take a call.
Okay, so if we can conclude in within 5 to 7 minutes.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Now see, there is a concept of legality, that the object and consideration to the contract must be legal. It means, in the most simplest sense, if the object or the consideration of the contract is unlawful, then the contract is void and illegal. An illegal contract is somehow different from the void agreement. As I'll tell you about illegal contracts, and there is simple. All illegal contracts are void agreement, but all void agreements are not illegal. You make a Venn diagram. The bigger circle will be of void, and smaller circle will be of illegal. All illegal contracts will be void contracts, but all void contracts are not illegal contracts. Now, illegal contracts are of 6 types. There are 6 types of illegal contracts, which makes a contract illegal and thereby void. Now, a contract which is illegal and a contract which is simply void but not illegal are different in a particular aspect. In the aspect of the collateral agreements, it means that if there is a contract, if there is an illegal contract and the contract is collateral to that illegal agreement, it means, suppose I want to buy AK-47 and I took loan from Harshbhai that Harshbhai, I need 1 lakh rupees to buy AK-47. Now, me buying AK-47 is illegal. So, the contract which is collateral to that, it means related to that. The loan transaction between me and Harshbhai, that will also become void. That will also become void because that is collateral or related to an illegal agreement. But simply if a contract is simply void but not illegal, the agreement which is collateral to it will not become void. Suppose, Harshbhai, I made a contract with someone that I will perform magic for them. Real magic, not magic show, but magic. I will discover the hidden treasure by magic. Now, this contract being impossible is void. And I took 1 lakh rupees from Harshbhai to make such machine or a machine to convert potato into gold.
Okay, so that only one person in India can do.
No, not going to that. No. But suppose if I took 1 lakh rupees loan from Harshbhai to make a machine of which will convert potato into gold. So obviously converting potato into gold is impossible. So that is void. But my loan agreement with Harshbhai will stand because it is collateral to a void agreement, but not an illegal agreement. So illegal agreements, I have a very interesting analogy regarding that. Void contracts unenforceable. Yes, void contracts are unenforceable. Unenforceable contracts are considered as void contracts. I have a very interesting analogy. Harshbhai will enjoy it. I'd say that a contract which is illegal is like a zombie. And a contract which is void is as like a dead person. If you will set the analogy, all zombies are dead persons, but all dead persons are not zombies. This is one thing. If you will stand next to a zombie, what will happen to you? You will also become a dead person. But if you are standing beside a dead body, just simply plain dead body, not zombie, then will that kill you? No, you will stay alive. So, in the simplest sense, if a contract is collateral related to an illegal agreement, that agreement will also become void. But if the contract is related to if the contract is related to an agreement which is not illegal but mainly void, that contract will remain valid. Now, what are the illegal agreements? There are 6 examples. Number 1, prohibited by law. Any agreement of killing someone is simply forbidden by law. Number 2, defeats the provision of law. If there is a particular contract you have made to suppose defraud, to defeat any provision of law. Suppose I made a contract in order to defeat the tax authorities. I make a fake charity to a fake NGO. I made an understanding with an NGO that I will give 10 lakh rupees. You give me 9 lakh rupees back, and I will get 10 lakh rupees exemption in IT return. So that is an agreement which will amount to defeating a provision of law. So you cannot defeat a provision by law. That is also illegal. Third is contract which is fraudulent. Fraudulent is simply if the purpose of the contract is to defraud someone. Like I want to sell a property which is tainted or a fake property to someone, and I just bribe his lawyer that I will pay you 2 lakh rupees. You just say that your client that the property is good and worth buying, and if he'll buy that property, I will pay you 2 lakh rupees. Here the agreement is done with an intention to defraud someone. So if your intention is to defraud someone, that is not a valid agreement. Another example is that, fourth is with an intention to injure someone's person and property. If your contract's purpose is to cause injury or harm to someone else, generally a contract is considered to be made for the purpose of protecting the interest of the parties involved. But if the contract is made in order to defraud someone else, then that contract is also considered as immoral. If to cause harm or injury to someone else, then that is also considered as illegal. Like I ask the particular person, you file a fake harassment case on someone. Now that is called that we will call something as contract which is made with an intention of causing injury to someone's person and property. Now fifth is immoral. Immoral here, immorality means sexual immorality. All the contracts of flesh trade, prostitution, or selling of human beings, that is all considered as immoral, and that is also considered as illegal. Sixth is opposed to public policy. Public policy includes a lots of things, but the majority important things are regarding, if we'll say, the contracts of maintenance and champati. Contract is alien enemy. You cannot do a contract with alien enemy. You cannot make a contract, marriage brokerage contract cannot be made, that I will get you married, and if I'll get you married, I'll pay you. If I will get you married, you may pay me 50,000 rupees. That is not also allowed. There are many things which are considered public policy, but simply in a simple sense, you say whatever conflicts with the societal interest or the policy of the government, that contract is considered as objective against the public policy, and that is considered as also illegal. So an illegal agreement is void and will also make any collateral agreement with as void as well. So this is about illegality. A very brief, since we are short of time. If you want more information on it, we can schedule it some another time.
Yeah, possibly yes, because there's another topic which is very much important, but it comes down to the law of contract, and that is the contract of agency. Basically, the employer-employee relationship and the contractor, the independent, the
number of things are there. The contract is something which is taught for one whole semester.
Yeah.
And agency another semester. So that is something.
So we have actually concluded. So we tried to just summarize it in these 2-hour session. One was yesterday and one we just did today. Really thankful, Animesh, for taking out time for all of us, and especially the law school aspirant, so that they can understand this particular topic. And obviously the example which you gave were from the past year papers, counting on the experience you have of teaching law school aspirant. And that was very much needed for everybody who is preparing for this year law entrance examination. What with the example which you have given are very much relevant to the law entrance examination, I can tell you that. And if you don't believe me, try solving all the past year papers and you will figure it out, each and every example over there. To add to this, thank you, Animesh, for taking out your time.
Thank you so much, Ashbhai. Akash asks that any book suggestion for contract act. You do not really need a book. As a law student, you don't need a book. when you will be in law school, read Henson, read R. Singh, and if you not in need for reading by Bangia or whatever, but
Avtar
as
Singh
a law
Bangia.
aspirant, you don't need a book of contract. Don't go that deep. Have a just a plain understanding, a broad understanding that will be sufficient. Don't go into much details. That will harm your preparation. My
And
mail
also,
ID as such, if you require, I am putting it out to everyone.
yeah.
Uh,
And of
and
course, the lecture one is also available on the YouTube. You can go and watch there. So the email ID is there and it has been shared by Anmesh already. So thank you, Anmesh, for this wonderful session and hope to see you back again with us.
I would just like to wish luck to everyone who is out there, who is preparing for CLAT. I generally really miss teaching law aspirants. They have a different kind of energy. And
Yeah.
I would just like to say to all of you, maintain this energy when you are in law school. Thank you so much for inviting me, Law Seco. I want to thank everyone, Harsh Bhai specifically, for introducing me to this wonderful, giving me this wonderful opportunity. If you have any queries, any doubt, my email ID is there. Do send me a mail. Contact me if you want my contact information. I will also give it that to you. There's no much problem. I am always happy to help CLAT aspirants as well as law students. If you have any queries, any doubts, you can obviously contact me. Thank you so much, Law Seco, for giving me this opportunity. Place of contract as in.
We will try to cover these topics in our forthcoming lectures as well, Animesh.
If you have any specific doubts, you can send it to me in the mail. Designer course, Harsh Bhai. I look forward to interacting with you all again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.